Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. So today on the show, as Cuba is facing widespread blackouts amidst their ongoing energy crisis, could foreign investments actually reignite their economy? We're going to hear from our team on the ground in Havana. But first, Israel and Iran say two top Iranian officials, Gholam Reza Soleimani, the head of the Basij force, and Iran's security chief Ali Larijani, were killed in strikes overnight. Larijani is the highest-ranking Iranian official to be killed since the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei at the beginning of this war. He was essentially the de facto successor, already leading a lot of the operations inside Iran even before Khamenei's death. Meanwhile, you have Israeli troops who are expanding their ground operations in southern Lebanon in what Israel is calling their quote-unquote forward defense strategy against Hezbollah. So what do these latest moves tell us about Israel's strategy and ultimate objective in the region? And how are Israelis reacting to both the war with Lebanon now and Iran? For that, I want to bring in NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley, who is on the ground for us in Tel Aviv. Hey, Matt.
Hey, how are you?
Good. So this morning, we all woke up to the news that you broke for our network here, the Israeli government releasing a photo of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, reportedly showing him ordering the strikes on these top Iranian officials. Israel saying that it's taken out two top leaders, Gholam Reza Soleimani and Iran's security chief, Ali Larijani. Ali Larijani especially an incredibly big deal when we're talking about leadership here. Walk us through what we know about them and how this went down.
Yeah, I mean, what we're hearing about Larijani is that, again, that he was killed. And this is not necessarily good news for those who were looking for a more pragmatic leadership, somebody to take over who would guide Iran out of its own crisis and guide it out of its war. Larijani was, while he did really manage the crackdown on a lot of the protesters back in December, before all this started, remember when President Trump really started threatening Iran in earnest, he was the architect of that crackdown and he directed it. And in many ways, he has been running the country not just since Khamenei was killed, who was assassinated in the opening shots of this invasion. But even before that, he was very much the man running the day-to-day operations. Now he's dead. So that means that there is no longer a real senior level connective tissue between Mojtaba Khamenei, the son, and the father, the assassinated leader of Iran. And that means that really there is no leadership as far as the West or Israel would understand it. This was a man who had really tended to the reins of government for the last several weeks. And in many ways, he was, while not necessarily a reformer, he was a conservative, he was a pragmatist. So this whole idea that there could be somebody who Israel, the United States, could pluck out of the wreckage of Iran and anoint as a leader, well, that just got a little bit more distant with the killing of Ali Larijani.
Yeah, I mean, he was essentially the successor to Khamenei, but couldn't be the actual successor because he was not a cleric. He was not a religious leader. So he was kind of seen as this military and political successor of Khamenei and had been quite close to him over the last few years. Let's talk about Israeli strategy going forward, Matt, and what you're hearing from the prime minister's office. So you have the Israeli defense minister essentially saying that they're going to go for all the leaders, right? They are targeting every single leader inside Iran, of those that are left, of course. How much in lockstep do we know the United States and Israel to be when it comes to strategic coordination with this ongoing war and a potential off-ramp?
Everybody that I've spoken to here in Israel has said, and has continued to say, that the coordination, the alliance, has been unprecedented in its effectiveness, in its intimacy, even, in the way that the Americans and the Israelis are sitting next to each other, plotting out where they're going to be attacking. And, this is because there's a war room here in Israel where we're seeing top-level Israeli and American officials working hand in hand. I just got back from a view of Israel's Arrow system. This is their anti-missile system that they've been using to great effect here to swat down those Iranian missiles. And they were saying that they are working hand in hand with the Americans, with their weapons systems, trying to prevent Iranian counterattacks.
So if they're coordinating, I'm wondering if they're also coordinating on a red line. And what I mean by that is one of President Trump's advisors, David Sachs, who's an artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency czar, recently said, quote unquote, Israel could get seriously destroyed, and then you have to worry about Israel escalating the war by contemplating using a nuclear weapon. The president was asked this yesterday. He said it's not going to happen. He seemed pretty confident. Have you heard anything from the prime minister's office that in fact is a red line for them? It's not somewhere they're willing to go?
No, we haven't heard that. I mean, the idea that the Israelis would use nuclear weapons seems rather foolhardy considering the circumstances and considering the fact that, I mean, let's just be honest. The Israelis, the Americans, do enjoy military dominance in Iran and over its proxies. Really, the Israelis have succeeded in reshaping the entire region by military force. So the question is not necessarily which weapons they're going to be using, and we hope that this isn't going to escalate any further. The fact is that we haven't actually seen the Israelis ever use this, ever acknowledge that they have possession of it, and for them to do this would be undercutting the gains that they've made on the battlefield, which are very real.
I also want to talk about what's happening on the ground in Lebanon with Israel expanding its ground operations there, sending more troops in to, quote, establish the forward defensive posture. What is the objective of what is happening in Lebanon?
Well, if you listen to Israel Katz, who's the defense minister, he said that it's not just to make a repeat of the operation they did in November of 2024 and a month before that. Basically, they want to, as he said, turn southern Lebanon into the Gaza Strip if Hezbollah doesn't give up its weapons. So there seems to be a bit of a real moment here in the Israeli leadership when it comes to Lebanon. And some of the folks that I've been speaking to have been saying, look, this was a gift that Hezbollah gave to the Israelis. They fired on the Israelis unprovoked, they said, in solidarity with the Iranians. And now the Israelis have a chance to take care of them once and for all, as they've been trying to do for decades. Whether or not they take that chance, or whether or not they take that chance without completely destroying southern Lebanon, that's yet to be seen.
So now that Israel is at war with Iran, and they're at war, it seems, with Lebanon as well, what are Israelis thinking about that?
Israelis are happy. And you can see this in the polling numbers, actually. The overwhelming majority of Israelis believe that attacking Iran was the right thing to do. And, when we talk about this, Yasmin, it's really important to remember the position that the Israelis find themselves in. We're talking about a blistering cross-continental war. But for Israelis, they're going back to school. They have advanced warning systems throughout the country. They have what they call, mamads, safe rooms, or bomb shelters in almost every building. They have a reliable means of taking cover and protecting themselves. That's why the casualty rate is still relatively very low. Only about a dozen people have been killed so far. Hundreds have been injured, most of them very lightly. So for the Israelis, it takes an extraordinary amount of confidence, being in such proximity to Iran, to launch the kind of attacks that they did, both back last June and again at the end of last month. You have to have the confidence that what comes back at you is going to be something that you can handle, which is why when we see the Israelis, how they behave in the Middle East, their defense is their offense. They know that they can parry the attacks by Iran, by Hezbollah, by the Houthis, by Hamas, and that's why they can take their case on the offensive with allies like the U.S.
Matt Bradley, thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin.
So 11 million Cubans were plunged into darkness on Monday when the island's electrical grid collapsed. This is just the latest chapter in this ongoing energy crisis, sparked by a U.S. blockade that cut the country off from Venezuelan oil. And it's coming on the heels of this surprise announcement from Cuba's deputy prime minister about a potential opening of the country's economy to foreign investment. So I want to bring in NBC News correspondent George Solis for more on this. He is on the ground for us in Havana. We actually tried to talk to you yesterday, but while we were getting ready, about to launch into the interview, Cuba lost power, which is emblematic, I should say, of some of the issues the island is dealing with. It seems to be now partially back up today, the power that is. But talk about what happened to the power grid there and how the situation on the ground compares to what you experienced when you visited Cuba a few years ago.
Yeah, my apologies. This is part of just the realities here of being in Havana, being in Cuba. At any moment, you do have power, and then it might just go out, and that affects comms and all sorts of other issues. when we went out last night after sunset, we stopped by someone's home and just really wanted to get a sense of what the realities are on the ground. And the first thing we found was a woman who was very reticent to speak with us. Her name was Yesabel Garcia, but over time she let us in once she knew that we were there to find out what it's really like for people living in communities that are just dealing with, at times, rolling blackouts, or in this case, a complete island that is without power. And she said, we've had to adjust. We've had to adapt to these realities. She took us into her living room. It was small, it was quaint, it was humble, with a bike light that you would ordinarily use on your bicycle, obviously, but that is now what's illuminating her home at night. She was there cooking a very small meal. They're rationing, of course, the food, right? She said, we can't just go to the grocery store or to the market and get food for the week, because if the power goes out for any indefinite number of days or hours, all of our food's going to spoil. So it's hard for me as a parent, she says, to think about that next meal for my child, how I get to and from work. When I visited in 2015, the city was still a lot more active. There's a lot more tourism. You saw places in Havana, in the area known as El Malecón, which is very scenic, where people were happy, they were jovial. There seems to be a little bit less joy. There seems to be a lot more deterioration here on the ground. Clearly, you could see that there's just a lot of despair, and a lot of people just hoping, especially as we talk about these potential conversations between the U.S. and Cuba, a cautious optimism that this might actually lead to economic prosperity for so many people hoping for a better tomorrow.
So you were actually in Havana for an exclusive interview with the Deputy Prime Minister, Oscar Perez Oliva Fraga. And he made a pretty major announcement that Cuba could open up to more foreign investment, including from Cubans living abroad. Tell us more about what the Deputy Prime Minister said to you today and how you even got that interview.
Yeah, I mean, NBC News has had a great relationship with Havana for a number of years. It's been a lot of coordination. A lot of people clearly played a role in securing an interview of this scale and magnitude. What was really interesting to me as speaking with him is just sort of how much he was ready to talk about this hope, this potential for businesses to come here. And we're not talking, to be clear, we're not talking about that family in Miami or Hialeah, for instance, who wants to open up or help grandma open up a shop here. We're talking about titans of industry, real companies, your Walmarts, your Targets, your Home Depots, of potentially having business here in Havana. I mean, that's what we talk about when we're talking about this opening of business. But obviously, he's not mincing words and realizes and says, so much of this is obviously dependent on what's happening with the blockade. These are conversations that need to happen. But obviously, it just speaks to the larger picture of this dialogue that it seems that the Cuban government is ready to have with the U.S.
I want to be clear here, though, as we talk about Cuba essentially saying we're open for business, or we are open to being open for business, that under the U.S. embargo currently, it is illegal for Americans to invest in projects related to the Cuban government. So just because the government is saying, let's go, let's do this, it doesn't mean that literally Walmart can say, okay, let's buy up some real estate in Havana and open up a shop there, right? It would take an act of Congress to actually get to the point in which U.S. businesses could be investing in Cuba.
That's exactly right. And that is part of the discussion and dialogue. And look, we wanted to ask him, why now? Have you had people, stakeholders, come to Cuba and say, we're potentially interested in opening up these stores of the future? And of course, he said, no comment on that at this point. So again, it's not just something that they're going to snap their fingers and is going to happen overnight. There's still so much more at play here. But to announce it clearly shows some type of intention to do more.
George, I know that you were just visiting a hospital there in Cuba, and it speaks to the desperation that Cubans are feeling right now, the lack of resources, right? What did you hear? What did you see?
Yeah, and it doesn't just apply to patients. The doctor that we spoke with said he had to walk more than 3 miles from his home to the hospital because of the lack of fuel. And then we spoke to a patient there, a leukemia patient, who said she nearly missed her appointment because she couldn't get from a very far away place here in Cuba to this critical appointment that she needs. So it really just speaks to just the issues that they're having just in the transportation sector alone. And we talk about medicine. When I spoke to one of the directors there at the hospital, we went into the room where all the medicine is, and it's in short supply. They're saying even the good faith of families and organizations that used to help fulfill needs of medicine, that's even harder to come by. One of the things that probably struck me the most was the fridge, where there was critical medicine that needed to stay cool at all times. But she said at any given time, we could lose power up to 3 times a day. So that could be a power outage for an hour, could be a power outage for 8 hours. So they have to find creative solutions to make sure that medicine stays viable for that patient that urgently needs it. At this hospital that we visited, they told me very clearly, look, we've been fortunate. We have not lost any patients, but the doctors there say they have no doubt that with absolute certainty that there's people here that are dying that don't need to die because they just can't get to a hospital. They can't afford, they can't get medicine that they critically need. And for them, they're saying to lose one patient because of what's happening, it's like losing a war for them. And so that sits in the back of their minds as they're treating every single patient. And again, to have this access into a hospital and see this reality firsthand is so rare. And it was just such a powerful moment for us to witness this in real time.
So the Deputy Prime Minister made this announcement yesterday, and considering what you have just laid out for us as to what people are experiencing on the ground on a day-to-day basis, what has been their reaction to the possibility of foreign investment in Cuba, of American investment in Cuba? How could it change things for them?
One man told me it'd be a breath of fresh air. One man saying if it means more businesses, if it means more economic opportunity, if it means more food on the table, they welcome it with open arms as long as the intentions are good. Many saying this is, they've sort of been here before, where they have this idea that there could be a positive dialogue between the U.S. and Cuba, and it means a better life for them, for their descendants, for their family. They're excited by it, but of course they have that potential, well, what if it doesn't happen, or what else could be around the corner? So, it's really just sort of a mixed bag of reaction from people here who are also just trying to make a living and live their day to day.
George Solis, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.